All right, status report on the Texans offensive line. One of the biggest needs. Feels like that's been a theme, really, of the organization. If you start from the beginning to now, at the very least, you can say they've added bodies. Now, are they good bodies? Who knows? I think there's one thing that they have solidified, which we'll get to in a sec. But let's go to the offensive line whisperer, Cody Stoots, break down all the moves the Texans are making in front of CJ Stroud here on SNL. Subscribe, like, right along all podcast platforms, and right here on YouTube.
The biggest thing for me, Landry, we talked about it in the early part of the offseason when they made the change at offensive coordinator. It felt like the messaging initially from the Houston Texans was this was all Bobby Slowick and Chris Strausser's fault. And that was the messaging for a while until they had the opportunity to blame the players. And I say blame the players in that they've swapped out some of these guys. Shaq Mason's not on the team anymore. He got a post-June 1st designation for his release. They traded Laramie Tunsil. They traded Kenyon Green. They brought in 4 new bodies on the offensive line. So I was wondering if that other shoe was ever going to drop because they had defended these offensive linemen. They had done I would say a good job probably by their standards of trying to keep them from, being dragged every week. But they were the biggest story from basically the midpoint on with this offense and the inability to get things going. And now the blame has finally hit the actual players because 3 of them who played a majority of the games last year for them at various spots, they're not on the team anymore for a variety of different reasons.
Yeah, and I think it kind of goes back to the one of my main themes of offensive complaints of the season last year was it's not one thing. And I think their actions have shown that, it's not one thing. It can be the system, it can be the players. It's a number of things. When you have an offense that functions that poorly, it is a number of things. And they've kind of made that clear with the moves that they've made. Now, the Tunsil thing is obvious because when you get rid of Laramie Tunsil, you're obviously going to have to replace him, and that's not easy. Regardless of what you say about him, regardless of whatever the conversation is, it's not easy to do. And it's hard to find a left tackle. But on the interior, I actually think they've improved because I don't think Kenyon Green and Shaq Mason were going to be factors. Now, how much have they improved? Could they still very well be one of the worst offensive lines and one of the worst interior offensive lines in the NFL? Yeah, they definitely could. They're probably closer to that than they are to being one of the best. They're probably a bottom half interior right now, and I think we can agree with that. But I will say the national narrative, and sometimes the national narrative can kind of poison you. And I'm not saying this in I don't listen to the national media types. I understand. But the reaction was kind of, well, they got rid of 3 starters on the offensive line. And I think anyone who follows the Texans closely, listens to this, listens to other people in the know, 2 of those guys weren't going to start in Kenyon Green and Shaq Mason. So really, they got rid of Laramie Tunsil. And I actually think in a crazy way, again, not great, but they've at least improved the interior of the offensive line.
Yeah, we were looking for anything last year. If it was Kendrick Green, if it was putting Juice Scruggs at one of the guard spots, anything would have been different. And now the Texans have done anything different, and everyone's crushing them because, they got rid of all these guys. They were the 19th scoring offense in football with one of the worst offensive lines in all of football. If they're the 20th best offensive line because they've made some improvements and some adjustments, they could be a really impressive compared to last year offense. They could make a nice leap and turn into a much better, hopefully top 3rd in the league offense because they were already fairly successful with the challenges that they created themselves that they had to overcome. If they could just fine-tune some of those things with this offensive line and make it better, and they've certainly tried by getting rid of guys and swapping them out. You mentioned the additions. How good are they? Well, let's take a look at them. I mean, because I don't know what to make about one of them, and then I sort of understand why the other 3 are here. We had this conversation at lunch. I have no idea what the deal with Laken Tomlinson is because you can't play as much football as he's played, and somehow, some way, you keep getting opportunities, but you can't be bad and play as much football as he's played.
Yeah, that's a fact. And speaking of lunch, shout out to Cebu, who we saw at lunch, ran into, has been a viewer from the beginning. And then shout out to J.A. I would say the first name. I don't want to butcher it, though. John? We'll say Jan and John. We'll cover all grounds.
I got to imagine it's probably John, right?
I don't know. But shout out to y'all. But the interior is interesting because I think Tomlinson's crazy because I get that everyone thinks he sucks, and I get that Trent Williams probably made him look better than he probably is in San Francisco. But starting all but one game since 2017 is insane for a number of reasons. But if he's really as bad as they say, then it's crazy that he's just remained in starting lineups. So I think that's one thing to keep an eye on. The Ingram thing is basically a Kenyon Green wash, where if you think that change of scenery is going to help Kenyon Green, maybe you're hoping the same thing for Ed Ingram. And then the Trent Brown thing I think is interesting because 3 years ago, whatever it was, 3-4 years ago, that was probably the name that the Texans most wanted fans. That was one of the most popular names for the Texans to sign. He ended up signing with the Raiders. And a couple years later, he's on the streets. So my question when we get into these interior offensive linemen, if you're not pleased with what they've done, my question would be, what was the alternative to what they did with the OL so far? And obviously, like, I think the most popular thing would be don't trade Laramie Tunsil. If you're in that camp, don't trade Laramie Tunsil. I can understand that. But I think in a crazy way, because the other popular thing would be, well, we should have signed some big name free agents. We should have signed a big name tackle. We should have signed a big name guard. We should have spent money. But in a crazy way, the guys that they brought in who are flawed, they've been exposed as flawed after they were the guys that perhaps we're talking about. Because often when you sign big names in free agency, 2 years later, those guys are on the streets. Like Trent Brown, I think, is on his third team since he signed that deal. Laken Tomlinson since San Francisco, he's on his third team since he signed that deal. So I think it's dangerous to think that the alternative to what they've done would be just going out there and signing free agents. And I know that there's some popular names and maybe guys on 1-year deals, but I do think in a crazy way, these flawed guys are kind of symbolic of the dangers, the lack of production, the lack of return on investment when it comes to these guys.
The Trent Brown conversation is interesting to me because it feels like he's like the gatekeeper for the offensive line. Brown tore his patellar tendon last year for the Bengals, and that's a very serious injury. We've talked about the patellar tendon thing when it comes to Ohio State prospect Josh Simmons, who is thought to be first-round talent at tackle, but he had a patellar tendon tear last year. That's the same thing Brown's dealing with, and he got hurt in week 3. And so if he's ready for training camp, it's kind of a medical miracle, but he should see something back, from a production standpoint. He should see that back down a little bit. So he kind of feels to me like the gatekeeper. You got to be better than Trent Brown to be on this team and play tackle. And there's some familiarity, obviously, there. A couple of stints with the Patriots. And the Patriots traded for him in 2018, and then they went on and won the Super Bowl with him playing left tackle. He went to the Raiders, like you mentioned. As soon as the Raiders were done with him, boom, the Patriots signed him right back up, had him playing all over the place, right tackle, a little bit of left tackle. So he's sort of that gatekeeper guy. And I wonder if Ingram and Tomlinson are both also gatekeeper level players where, hey, if you're better than those guys, we'll probably start you, or you're for sure on the team. And if you're not as good as those guys, see you later. The one that I feel like people probably have the most reaction to is Cam Robinson because of the financial commitment to him. And it's like, well, could you have spent Cam Robinson's money on a guard and felt better about one of the two guard spots versus feeling good about the tackle spot? Not to say that everybody feels good, but could you have felt good about one guard spot for 1 year versus how you feel about the tackle spot? Because Cam Robinson, he's only played left tackle in the NFL. He has played more left tackle than probably anybody on this roster right now, including Trent Brown. So Cam Robinson is experienced. There are elements of his game that are big positives. There are elements of his game that are not good. He's also been in some really crappy situations. Like, we talk about this with players all the time. Well, God, you end up in Cleveland. That place has been a disaster for 3 decades. Well, you end up in Jacksonville. That place has been a disaster for like 10 years now. It's like, if he gets in a better situation, could he be a little bit better player? Could you fine tune some things about his game? And then it really kind of sets the tone for all the guys who had Texans uniforms last year. Okay, these are the guys you got to beat out. These are the guys you got to be better than. And if I was Titus Howard, Landry, I'd be sitting here and I look at this roster. I have a hard time finding me a spot. So I better come in ready to work and ready to take care of business if I'm still on the Texans when training camp gets here.
Yeah, the other thing about it with what they've done is I don't think anyone should feel good about this offensive line at all.
No.
Matter of fact, you should be terrified. Like you should be terrified of this offensive line. And I think even the best case scenario, and I don't like, maybe we can get ahead of ourselves if we want, but I don't know whether you want to. I know we're going to try to connect this to the draft in some way, shape, or form because we're about a month away from draft time, most magical time of the year. By the way, we're going to try to figure out something to do, some sort of gathering on Saturday, day 3. We're going to be live streaming the first 2 days, but we're going to try to figure out something for sure, 100%. So stay on the lookout for that. But even I think if this works out, like best case scenario, let's say everything awesome that can happen happens, and every like potential positive or ceiling is met with Robinson, Tomlinson, Ingram, Brown, and then I'll throw Blake Fisher in there because we haven't seen him play, and that's obviously the one that you have the most long-term investment in. Your long-term offensive line issues are going to be the exact same next year. Like this is not a long-term fix by any stretch of the imagination. So even the best case scenario for what they've brought in is that you're able to kind of plug the flood before it kind of bursts out, because you're still not feeling great about your long term. The things that could happen for you to feel a little better would be Juice Scruggs starts looking like they think he looks like. If Jared Patterson gets a chance, he does. And most importantly, Blake Fisher looks good. But these moves, like, make no mistake about it, best case scenario, this is just kind of holding things together for a year.
Yeah, Robinson, Tomlinson, Ingram, and Brown are all 1-year deals. Like Ingram's got 1 year left on his deal. Tomlinson was a 1-year signing, and so was Brown and Robinson. Those are all just it's like you said, it's plugs on a leaky part of this team. Obviously, if you're talking about scenarios that could, if Juice Scruggs somehow turned into a worthwhile guard, and you had Patterson, Scruggs, and Fisher hold down 3 of the 5 spots, that's long-term like stability in 3 of the 5 spots. But really, as you kind of look at this thing, if you're talking about from the long term, you're just hoping Fisher and one of the 2 centers hold something down, and that there's people knocking on the door at the other spots post-draft, because you don't want to be 6 weeks into the season and re-signing Cam Robinson for 2026. You don't want to be thinking about Ed Ingram or Laken Tomlinson in 2026. You want these guys to get in here, do what they do in 2025. Hopefully somebody plays well enough they don't even make the team. Or if they make the team, you've got somebody that's ready at the end of the year to sort of cycle them out, and then you get the new bottom of the roster type guys.
Yeah, and I think the most important thing is, man, Blake Fisher's got to be able to beat out one of these guys, and it's got to be a fair beat out, not this guy looks like Matt Khalil type of beat out. Like, Blake Fisher has got to win the battle at right tackle. Like, he's got to look a lot better than he did last year. He's got to look more comfortable. He's got to look stronger. Like, that's the thing that you really, really, really want to happen, because they invested pretty decently in Blake Fisher, and it was a proactive move, and you just hope that starts to pay off. So that's, as far as the long term, I think that's extremely important.
They pretty much drafted Blake Fisher for the scenario that played out in 2024 is, hey, we might need him this year because these guys have injury histories and we're maybe not sure about some of these spots. And then we're definitely going to need him in 2025. And that was among, I'm not going to say it was the first, but that was among one of the first day 2 tackles taken. And the run started after that. So Caserio started the run. And some of these other guys, they haven't been very good. Like the Chiefs couldn't put their guy on the field. The Suamataya from BYU, they couldn't put him on the field. Coleman and Wallace from the Commanders and the Patriots, okay. Roger Rosengarten was thought to be pro-ready from Washington last year. Texans picked Fisher because he had a higher upside. Well, you got to hope you see it in 2025. You got too many moving parts to have one of the guys you're sort of betting on. You don't want Trent Brown playing right tackle coming off a torn patellar tendon. That's not what you want. Trent Brown's there as break glass in case of emergency. Trent Brown's not brought in to start. So, if we're sitting here and it's, the middle of August, we're like, God, they got to start Trent Brown at right tackle. Get ready, CJ. Hope you worked on the wheels.
Yeah, and the other thing that I think that this does, and this is good for training camp content, the C word is alive this season, and that C word is competition. There is going to be.
Glad you clarified.
Yeah, there's competition. There might be competition at 5 spots. I don't know how they're going to handle Cam Robinson. Are they just going to hand him the left tackle spot and say, go do it? I don't know. But last year there was none. This year there's going to be, it's basically a fat man WWF Royal Rumble, old school. This is competition. And this is a free for all.
I do enjoy that element of what they've done with the offensive line. I'd tell you Cam Robinson's likely the left tackle, but I would hope that he has to just kind of keep the distance between everybody else. I feel like he starts with a little head start at left tackle. Everybody else, it feels like I like that element from Cole Popovich's offensive line and what Nick Caley is sort of allowed Nick Caserio to build for them as far as the offensive line. Let the strong rise to the top. Let them go out there, and if you go out there and you draft 2 rookies and they beat out Ed Ingram and Lincoln Tomlinson at guard, cool. Start the rookies. Or you got or Kelvin Banks Jr. from Texas falls into your lap and you want to give him a crack at left tackle instead of Cam Robinson. He beats out Cam Robinson. Cool. Make him a $13 million backup. I don't give a damn. I want the 5 best players on the field. I don't care what the investment is. I don't care how they got on this team. I want the 5 best. They didn't do that last year. They didn't put the 5 best players on the field. They kept running Kenyon Green's sorry ass out there. They kept running Shaq Mason out there. They ran Shaq Mason out there after a month of him sitting around hurt. So they didn't do that last year. They weren't putting best 5 out there every time last year. Do it this year.
So I guess just to piggyback off what you said, it is SNL, Landry Locker, Cody Stoots with you. Shout out to all the people in the chat. So do you think that the offensive line moves have opened up draft possibilities? Because you're talking about Kelvin Banks. There's some who wonder, do you go all line now? Is it seem like it's leaning more receiver? You don't think this impacts the draft at all?
The Houston Texans, when the season ended, 1 and 2 on my list for what they needed for this offense was wide receiver and guard. It's still number 1 and number 2 for me, wide receiver and guard. They still got to go out there and get wide receivers, and they still got to go out there and get guards to help out. Lincoln Tomlinson or Ed Ingram or even Cam Robinson. And again, when we talk about a guy like Kelvin Banks Jr. from Texas, that's an immediate guard option, perhaps. That's an immediate tackle option, perhaps. And that's a long-term tackle option for you as well. Your draft picks, as much as free agency and the moves to this point have been about 2025, those picks are about the next 3-4 years when you make those selections. How can that guy fit now? What can he do for me on game day in 2025? And then where can I see him? That's exactly why Blake Fisher got drafted. What can he do for me in 2025? Well, if someone sucks and we got to bump Titus inside, Blake Fisher's going to play for us. What's he going to do for me in 2026? Well, hell, I guess he's going to start or 2024, 2025. What's he going to do for me next year? Well, I guess he's going to start if we have to move on from these guys. It's that's what I would say with you get the right guy at guard or the right offensive lineman at 25, do it, but you still need wide receivers, still need guys for CJ to throw the ball to. So it's still 1-2 for me. Wide receiver guard, wide receiver guard. It hadn't changed even with the additions that they've made.
Yeah, and I just don't know if the opportunity presents itself at wide receiver. That's the other thing that I'm starting to wonder. I don't even know if it presents itself on the offensive line. So what direction do they go? I think that might be something good to discuss tomorrow. If they don't draft an offensive lineman or a wide receiver, what do they do? I think I think that we just found tomorrow's topic. Tomorrow on SNL, if they don't go wide receiver or offensive line, what direction do the Texans go in round one?
Not only could we do the direction, I'll get you a 6-pack of guys. I'll get you 6 exact guys that they could draft at 25 if they don't go wide receiver or lineman.
Tomorrow at 4:00, we got you covered on that. Swarm into the super chat. Chance Harris.
You ain't never hate.
Swarm.
I'm not an OL guy. How do guys win over starting spots in the offseason training camp? Love the show. They outplay them in camp. They outplay them in the preseason, or the coaches just see something to where they start them. Sometimes it can be contractual. I've seen times where it seemed like a guy beat out the other guy and then he doesn't win. So there's really no method to the madness, but basically the evaluation starts at training camp. One guy starts with the first team, other guy starts with the second team. Whoever gets his ass kicked the least typically starts, or they can factor in other things to kind of make that decision.
Well, I'll tell you where it starts for some of these guys when they walk in the building to report for training camp. Like you'll know some of these guys like, oh, Jesus, look at him. He didn't work out at all. Or, damn, who's that guy? You know?
Every day it's just me and a pile of iron.
Yeah, so that's where it starts for some of these guys.
Titus, immediate looking at.
He is body guy number 1, day 1. We're looking for Titus.
Yes,
he takes over the Kenyon Green body guy, day 1, number 1. I would also say they don't run patty cake training camp. I know some of these teams run patty cake training camp.
No.
D'Amico Ryans lets them freaking go after it, especially when they throw the pads on with the linemen.
He's smart though.
Right. Well, here's what I tell you.
They get good rest days. He's smart. He knows when to chill.
Here's what I would tell you for the interior offensive linemen. Don't let Mario Edwards look like Aaron Donald out there. Don't let Sheldon Rankins look like Dexter Lawrence out there, because that's what the interior line did last year with Foley Fatukasi and Mario Edwards. And I was leaving training camp practices like, Jesus, do they have 4 Pro Bowlers on the defensive line? No, it just turns out they had 3 guys on the inside that couldn't block a lick. That's what they had. So don't let Mario Edwards and Sheldon Rankins look like all pros in training camp. That's start number 1 for whoever the interior guys are.
Man, they look good. And then Settle would have a couple good days too. He'd be like, oh, I think I might have something.
Yeah, it's like, golly.
But we disagree a bunch of bodies. Like there's optimism because there is competition. You have more intriguing options on the interior. The Tunsil question is still valid. So it's not, there's no reason to feel overly optimistic about the offensive line, but there is reason to be somewhat intrigued and have a healthy amount of skepticism and check it out, or an unhealthy amount of skepticism, however the hell you want to do it.
There may be damn near nothing anybody can. There may be some people out there that cannot be made content with this offensive line in 2025, and I get it. I would understand it, but they have got to just get. They don't have to be the Eagles or the Lions next year. They really don't. They've just got to jump like 10 spots. Like they've got to go from the 29th best offensive line to like the 19th best offensive line, and they'll mow some people over if that happens. Like they had some moments last year with a bad offensive line where it looked good. Like they were the leading passing team like 6 or 7 weeks into the season at one point. Like there was still some elements of good from that really disappointing overall performance of the offense. And if they got 10 spots better as an offensive line because they had 5 guys that they trust that all know exactly what to do, and the scheme's better and the coaching's better, that'd go a long way for this team.
Yeah, and I think Patrick brings up a good point. He says it well. I think we've covered all grounds, but like to connect it, being skeptical about the moves and understanding the moves, I think it's kind of something that you connect, because that's why we talked about the alternatives. Like, I don't know that there was like really much you could do about it. It's almost like going to a restaurant with an average menu and you have X amount of dollars to spend. Like, if the restaurant sucks and the filet mignon's not good and it's overpriced or whatever, like you kind of just bargain shop. I'm going to get, I'm going to get
appetizers.
Yeah, I'm gonna give me a few appetizers or something like that. And, maybe they suck, but, at least I didn't drop $70 on something that's gonna make me sick. So that's the important part about the draft. I think it's the important part about free agency. And I'm going to say this 100 times. You can't just unfortunately you can't just say, okay, we want an awesome receiver with this 25th overall pick, or we want an awesome offensive lineman. That would be awesome if it could happen, but sometimes it's not available. And I think the only time that we understand it is when it's quarterback. Generally speaking, the only time that's like a clear understanding of it is when it's a quarterback, because it's so blatantly obvious more times than not. Like if the Texans were at 25 and they needed a quarterback, nobody would be sitting here saying, well, we need a quarterback, because you would know that that's really not, you're really not in a good situation to do that.
Yeah.
But because it's offensive line, because it's receiver, there's a lot of possibilities, and some of these guys will end up being players. It's like, man, we should draft it. We got to draft receiver. We got to draft O-line. You might need it, but sometimes that just doesn't work out.
I would also say, too, we talked about wide receiver and offensive line when the season ended and the offseason got going. They've added 7 players between the wide receiver room and the offensive line this offseason. They added Berrios and Watson as depth guys in the wide receiver room, so competition for that 5-6 spot. Then they added what is right now a new number 2 in Christian Kirk. And then on the offensive line, we've gone over it, 4 new faces, each really with a defined position, because Ed Ingram played right guard in Minnesota and Lincoln Tomlinson's played left guard in his career. Obviously, we know what Trent Brown's played and we know what Cam Robinson's played. It's like they've thrown 7 new bodies into the equation, and they're going to continue to throw some bodies at those spots. Like they have identified that they have needs there, and they've gone about swapping some guys out and adding new faces.
And as far as the Christian Kirk, because it's always polarizing when you say he's a number 2 receiver. He's a number 2 receiver here. We don't know whether he's going to be a quality number 2 receiver. We don't know what the offensive line is going to look like. So we can't say, here's your starting whatever. We have no idea. But on this team with where they're at, he's your number 2 receiver for better or worse. So that's the other thing.
Well, who do you – okay, CJ Stroud drops back. Who do you want his number 1 option to be? Boom, it's easy. It's Nico Collins. CJ Stroud can't throw the ball to Nico Collins. Who do you want to throw the ball to right now? It's Christian Kirk. It's not Dalton Schultz. It's not, Cade Stover. It's not Brevin Jordan. It's not John Mechie. So hopefully when I ask that question in, 30, 31, 32 days, the answer is insert wide receiver they drafted. I want them to throw that guy the ball. Hopefully.
No guarantees.
No guarantees.
On the soup, SW1 says, might be optimistic, but despite serious injuries, I don't see why the Texans wouldn't at least be interested in Sheriff, Asante Samuel, and Nick Chubb. It's a lot of good names.
Brandon Sheriff, guard from the Jaguars. They seem to have a very specific type of guard they're going to go get. And maybe Sheriff a little bit too old for him at that spot, guard. And, he tried to fight Azeez Al-Shire too.
Yeah, they do have I don't know if that would stop them, but yeah, they kind of seems like they've kind of piled up in at least that range of type of player at this point.
Nick Chubb is done. I'm not interested in Nick Chubb. I have zero interest in Nick Chubb. And Asante Samuel Jr., it felt like he had a nice career in LA with the Chargers. I don't know why he's not on a team, but it's probably
Caserio knows his dad, but yeah, I don't know about the
if a corner's not signed by now, it's because he's asking for too much money or he can't cover. So my guess is Asante Samuel Jr. is probably asking for too much money, and that's why he's not signed.
That's very possible. Also on the couple receivers, because receivers obviously where we go. We actually had this conversation today. JB Allen, the Annihilator, says, if your picture is scaring the fuck out of me, by the way. If Tet McMillan drops in the draft as he's dropping in mock draft, should we grab Tet if he's no longer the second best wide receiver after Hunter, or second guy taken, I guess he's saying.
So the wide receiver rankings this year, it's going to vary widely. It feels like from draft prognosticator to draft prognosticator. Ted McMillan started the draft process as clearly wide receiver 2, behind Travis Hunter, if you're considering him a wide receiver. Seems like he's going to primarily play cornerback, so take that for what it's worth. And then now it's like, well, is he kind of slow? Is he actually not as physical as you think he is? Like, the competition wasn't great, so is he as good as we think he is? And, Golden runs fast at the combine. Egbuka is like the model citizen, and he's fast, maybe faster than Ted McMillan and a little bit more physical, and he's got a better body.
By the way, we'll find out if he is in 2 days. Ohio State Pro Day this week. 2 days. Texas is tomorrow. Ohio State, 2 days. We'll find out if he is fast.
Yeah, so the draft process has not been kind to him, but that's a lot of the kind of the extra stuff, whereas you go watch Arizona, not a very good football team this year. They were much better last year. Or not a very good football team this past season. They were much better in 2023. You go watch it. He was their offense for good long stretches of both seasons. Like, they had to get the ball to Ted McMillan, and he would just get open, and he made it look effortless sometimes. I like Ted McMillan. I probably like him more than other people. The thing I would worry about...
You love him.
The thing I would worry about from just like what are the Texans getting is his abilities replicate a lot of what Nico Collins can do without the top end that Nico Collins has showcased. Like, Nico running past the Buffalo Bills defense to catch a bomb, I don't know that Ted McMillan's ever doing that. But can Ted McMillan run 15 yards, cut inside, he's wide open because he shook loose of his man? Yeah, he can do that. Now, when he gets hit, he's going to go down right away because he's kind of spindly. He's not built up, so I like him. I believe in him. It does feel like he's going to get closer to the 20s than, the top 10 guy, like a lot of people believed he was going to be.
And then another interesting name, and Chase brought this up, and this kind of has the draft nerd internet going nuts. It's not like trending or anything, but it has the draft nerd portion, which we very much support. We support everyone from the casuals to the nerdy ass dudes. We support you all. But Restrepo, there's like a lot of talk about anywhere from 4.75 to 5.1. You can hear Restrepo ran the 40 at like 4.7 or 5. Like, it's all over the place. And it does look very slow, much slower than he looks on the field. So this is another guy. He might have played himself into round 3. Not the best pro day that we've seen. This is almost like a lower version of the Orlando Brown pro day. Did not go well for him.
Well, here's what I would say about Xavier Restrepo. If you're ever asking him to run in a straight line, you're not using him right. That's not what he does. Running in a straight line, everybody's catching his ass. He's not good at that. But ask him to put a move on a linebacker and see if that guy can stay with him in short area. That's what Restrepo does.
This is the video from NO3 Sports.
Oh boy, does it look bad?
I'm gonna let you tell me, because
4.83 is really bad.
Well, there were people who had 4.7, but you want to judge the 40 or not? Yeah, I know you're being a little open-minded. All right, you ready for this?
Yeah.
All right, here we go. This is from I'll shout him out after again too.
Good Lord, he's moving in slow motion.
Go down and grab your leg, man. Come on. Where are these coaches at? Start limping, man. Start limping.
We're going to find out tomorrow. Xavier Restrepo ran with
he's kicking cement as we speak.
He popped his hamstring.
That's from NO3 Sports. So
yeah, look, hey, go have him do some other drills where he's not running in a straight line. Let's see.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I think he's an intriguing prospect. I wouldn't put a lot of stock in it. And the reality is, like, this is a guy who you were talking about as like maybe he plays himself into the third, but he's a day 3 type of guy. So it's not like, it's not like if Ibuka does something like that in 2 days, then it's viral. Like it's a viral thing. That's not just the nerdy section; it's viral.
If Ibuka runs a 4.8, get ready to learn second round, buddy. Get ready to be on the Giants with the 30-something of the overall pick.
Mike Roberts.
Now, I saw somebody in the chat say it. Jeremy said it. Like, hey, they don't always hate. The Texans don't always care about workout slow because Kamari Lassiter was workout slow.
Mike Roberts says they need Restrepo and Eisen to race in the 40.
Yes.
Yeah, not great. Yeah, but Kamari wasn't. Yeah,
it's also a little different too.
Kamari's other drills were elite though.
So Restrepo is he's a very weird case study because he clearly is straight line slow here. We just saw that. There's also, and I found the tweet because people really were wondering about his size because he's a little bit bigger than a lot of slot guys. He's the first wide receiver since 2003 to be under 5'10", but heavier than 205 pounds. So he's like a little, he's built like a little brick house, a little tiny brick house. But he can mix it up in the run game, and then his ability to get open as a slot receiver. I don't think there's a lot of questions about that. He's just not running away from anybody once he catches the ball.
Yeah, I mean it happens, dude. Like
see
guys do work in the slot and then they end up not doing it. Welker ran a 4.6.
Okay, well that's Wes Welker's basically Usain Bolt compared to your Restrepo.
Yeah, I think he ran like a 4.63 or 4.65, something like that. So,
all right, Edelman ran a 4.52. All right, get Restrepo out of here. See you later. Jesus, Amendola ran a 4.58. All these guys are basically world-class sprinters compared to him.
Yeah, he might. I mean, he might go undrafted now. Like it's a pretty. I'm serious.
Oh man.
I mean, I'm serious. When small and slow is not a good combo. But who knows? He's definitely not going day 2. If he does, he's something shocking.
Let me look at these 40 times here from the wide receivers.
What are you just looking at all the white guys?
No, I'm looking to see four. No.
There you go. Go ahead. Tell me what Danny Amendola ran.
No, 4.86 would have been slower than every wide receiver that ran at the combine by over a second. 4.70 was the slowest wide receiver 40.
Jesus. Yeah, that's bad.
I'll tell you what, all of a sudden all these other guys look a whole lot faster than Restrepo.
Yeah, it's not like a 40 is everything, but when you're that type of prospect, it's a difference between.
Well, and here's what I would tell you too.
A big difference.
It demonstrates how long potentially your athleticism hangs around. Like what level of athleticism do you have right now? And as you grow older, as you face an NFL season, as you get banged up, and you're not 100%, how good of an athlete are you, as it sort of ticks down and wears on you over the course of the season too.
Yeah. What'd you make of the Texans visiting with Golden last week?
They should check in with guys. They had not met with him at the combine when we talked to him, correct?
Not yet, but he said he had one set up.
Right. So we know that they greatly value how those players interact on that visit, because Nick Caserio has told the story time and time again about CJ Stroud. It matters. It matters a lot. Not so much the Stroud element, which was CJ Stroud was the same guy with everybody they interacted with, from the other players that were there to the people that picked them up to the coaches, everybody. But Caserio mentioned that there was a player that when the coaches and he were in the room, he acted one way, and then he didn't act that same way with everybody else. He kind of acted, like maybe a little arrogant or this or that. I would do anything to know who that
Towards
player
the
was.
workers, not like with the players. Like
Right.
he said towards the workers.
Right. So, I mean, I've long thought it was either Kayvon Thibodeau or Sauce Gardner, but I don't have anybody to confirm that for me.
I don't think it was Sauce.
But you know that they talk about that story a lot, so they care. And then it's a great opportunity those are long visits with these guys.
Look, Cody,
You know,
I was asking you what you think of Golden. I wasn't asking you to break down what a visit is.
well, I told you it's
We
important.
know what a visit is. It's important.
I
But
told
what do
you-
think of Golden.
I wouldn't draft him, but they clearly need to check him out.
Would you wouldn't take him if he's there at 25?
No, I wouldn't take him. I'd take Ibuka.
Do you feel like the 2016 draft where it was like Corey Coleman and like other guys, that's kind of what this feels like. This feels like 16, 17.
I'd have to go back and kind of
Look up 16 and 17.
It damn sure don't feel like last year where it felt like you could have thrown a dart and hit a good wide receiver.
When 7 were taken in the first round.
Yeah. And then the first 2 picks in the second round were wide receivers too.
And then McMillan went later too.
And I'll go to my grave telling you Adonai Mitchell's a great football player. He's just on the wrong team.
Yeah, I think Adonai's good. You know how I feel about that.
So you said 16?
Yeah, go to 16 and 17. That's what this wide receiver class feels like to me. You can pull it up if you want. 16 and 17.
Corey Coleman, Will Fuller, Josh Doxson. Oh,
yep.
God.
That's what this feels like. And the Texans actually took Fuller. That was their second pick. Was it 25th overall? What was it?
I know that it was like, I think it was one of the early times that Rick Smith actually traded up.
Yeah. But yeah, that was, I mean, and they actually did a good job with Will Fuller. But you look at the other guys, not great. 16 and 17.
So 16.
This is what this year's draft class feels like, receiver wise.
Oh, Laquan Treadwell was like a special teams guy for 15 years.
We ended up like the best ones ended up being right there in the second round, 47-55, Michael Thomas and Tyler Boyd. And my God, the Texans took Braxton Miller 30 picks later. But after that,
Braxton, hold on to the ball when he flipped into the end zone and O'Brien lost his freaking mind.
Yeah, so you look at that and then go up to 17.
Yeah. Jeez.
Kind of similar, where you had like Corey Davis, that's McMillan, Mike Williams, and then you had John Ross won that 40, and then there's really no one. And then the second round, third round ended up being the money spot. Obviously, Cooper Kupp was the gem there.
Juju was awesome when he first got in the league.
And then Godwin in the third too.
Kenny Golladay was good for 4 years, and then he got a massive deal and quit
That
trying.
dude got broke off by the Giants.
Mac Hollins still playing football.
Yep.
I also would have bet you that D.D. Westbrook was going to be good.
Yeah, I thought he was too. He was nice at OU.
Let me go just take a look.
But yeah, but then go up to 20. Like, and that's the exercise that I'm kind of hammering home, because 19 we can move past. But look at 20 and look at what you start seeing, and just how, like, just look at the names. Like, just go down, like, from the first round, like Ruggs, Judy, Lamb, Jalen Reagor, obviously didn't work out. Jefferson, Ayuk, Higgins, Pittman. And then, you know, it kind of falls off a little bit. Antonio Gibson, the running back. And then it just kind of falls off there. But they now go up to 2021. That's 2020 right there. And this is where, like, this is why it's weird that there's no receivers, because normally we kind of trained our mind to where 25 you can get a good receiver. Look at 2021: Chase, Waddle, Devontae, Tony, Bateman, Elijah Moore, and then it kind of falls off there too. But in the first round, like, you would have been excited.
Nico in the third, Amon-Ra in the fourth.
Yep. And then go up to 2022. You have, I mean, Jesus, Drake London, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Jamison Williams, Jahan Dotson, Treylon Burks. Like, this is like we're talking 3 deep right now. And even you, like, one of the most popular guys, you're like, I don't really like him at 25. And then it kind of falls off there. And then you go to 2023.
That's what this year feels like. It feels like a 2023 year.
Really? Well, if it's 2023, then yeah, I mean you're kind of SOL at 25, but Addison Flowers all going in there
Like Quentin Johnston could be Tetero McMillan
for sure. That's why I wonder, like, if he falls to the Chargers, do they take him or do they go with the tight end?
and Zay Flowers, like he could be Igbuka, where it's like the speed's not top end. He does all the dirty work.
Yeah.
Addison's a nice player.
Very nice.
Rasheed Rice ended up being a nice player.
Yeah, he's nice. This guy's
Marvin Mims is a serviceable player. Downs has a role for the Colts. Tanks obviously.
Let's talk about Hyatt. But there was like a lot more. And then you go to last year, 7 guys taken in the first round. Like it was.
Hello, Dontavian Wicks way down there.
I mean, you go to this one. It's like 7 guys.
You had 11 in the first 2 rounds.
Like if you were at 25 now, Brian Thomas goes 2 spots before you. Xavier Worthy goes 3 later. Pearsall goes 6 later. Leggett goes 32. Keon Coleman, Ladd McConkey, Adonai Mitchell. Like it's almost like they're a year late to needing a wide receiver, you know? And then when you factor in that they traded for Diggs, and that it just kind of hurts a little bit, you know? But hey, we're moving past that. Not a big deal. We understand.
Well, if they hadn't drafted a backup tackle last year, they could have got one of these wide receivers traded up for them.
Yeah, I mean, like if you just think about it, like if they stay put, let's say they add McConkey, it's like, ooh, that coulda, woulda, shoulda,
Well, here's what I would say: they're maybe a year late on the wide receivers. Although every year there's wide receivers that are good.
No, someone like there will be a Nico Collins, Amon-Ra St. Brown situation. It'll happen.
This is the perfect year for guards. So, I mean, all these tackles that can't play tackle got to go play guard. All the guards that actually are guards that can play guard. You know, perfect year for guards. They timed it out just right, Landry. I also wonder if next year's a big tackle draft, and that's why they've kind of synced this thing up. They know that there's going to be some good tackles next year.
You think they're already looking at that? Dom from Jersey says, Stoots, we really can't focus on the draft until we cut Fairbairn. It's a must.
Get out of here. You're out of here. Do I have to paint my face for you to respect me?
Oh, yeah, he changed the picture, didn't he? Just because Tunsil got traded, he changed the picture, didn't he?
Yeah. Yeah. The golden visit, though, I mean, I'm not going to be upset if they get him at 25. I believe Igbuka is a better fit for them. But Golden's a fine player. He would have been –
I mean, he'd have been
the 10th wide receiver in last year's draft.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I'm having to adjust. But the good thing about it is, like,
I'm sorry, he'd have been the 12th wide receiver for me in last year's draft.
The thing is, though, if you miss on wide receiver, as long as they're serviceable, it might not be as bad, you know. Like as long as they're like, if he's not like a top end guy, but he's like a solid contributor for a few years, and he gets better each year, then maybe you can justify it.
Well, you need him to be a really solid 3rd wide receiver in 2025, and then hopefully be good enough to be the number 2 in 2026.
Maybe he gets better.
The tough part is Marvin Harrison upside is a 1. Neighbors upside's a 1. Adunze upside's a 1. Thomas upside's a 1. Xavier Worthy upside's like a borderline 1-2. Pearsall borderline 1-2. Leggett upside's a 1. Coleman upside's a 1. McConkey was the 1 for the Chargers this past year. And it's like Golden, like, maybe he's a 1, but probably actually just a 2.
Dominic wants to be serious now. He says, why don't you like Golden? I don't love Golden either. And I watch, like, I'm a Texas guy, and I watch him with the Cougs. I don't love him. I don't love him at 25. I just don't think in a normal draft he's a 25th overall. Like, I don't even think it's a question that he's there in most of these receiver drafts. Like, that's the thing. I don't even think it's a question. Like, it's more so like we're focusing as much on will he be there, which I think sometimes like increases people's desire to get him because there's that question. But in like the previous wide receiver drafts that we just talked about, like I don't think it's a question that he's there.
I mean, he had. I feel like people like him a whole lot more because he had 2 badass games at the end of the season.
Well, he had the big play against Arizona State when Texas should have lost. He had the 4th down, and he had,
against 2 of his final 4 games, Georgia and Arizona State, he went for 15 catches, over 300 yards, and a touchdown in those 2 games. And that's Georgia, and that was a playoff game. And I feel like that's kind of just in front of people's minds. And
well, you watched me, and I don't think Georgia was the SEC title game.
Yeah.
And you're talking about the playoff game, but you've watched Texas games with me, and you're talking about someone who got shingles when they lost. So it's pretty crazy. Like my parents and all that. At no point, like watching that intensely, like most of you do the Texans, did I ever say, "Man, we got to get the ball to Golden." Man, get the ball to Golden. Like I didn't feel like Texas had a number 1 wide receiver this year. No. I know that he went down. Like I never at any point I said get it to Blue, because he wasn't getting the ball enough. But like I'm just saying all that to say, as someone with like an intense rooting interest, this isn't like some scouting report, but I never felt like Texas had like some number 1. If you would have told me Matthew Golden last year, like even after the season was going to be talked about as a first round pick, I would have said, huh? I would have said what? I wouldn't have really believed it.
Yeah.
That's just me though. That's just me. Like y'all might watch it different than me. That's just how I felt. I mean, that doesn't matter. I probably say that about a lot of good guys. I probably say that about St. Brown at USC. So do with that what you will.
Yeah, I like Burden more than him too. There's just other wide receivers I like more than Golden. If he's there at 25, they pick him. That's fine.
Diablo's asking, have you seen the SMU running back Smith? He's a steal.
He's a freak. I love him.
I think they love him.
They talked to him at the Senior Bowl. They talked to him at the Combine.
Yeah, and I think they love him, and I think he is a guy who can play everything. Like you might actually be like, we might be looking at receiving options in the wrong place, like because he is that. Like if you want someone who can do some damage in the pass game, who's been asked and called upon, he's taken on any role that the coaches have asked him. This is the guy, and I think they really like him. I think they very much like him.
Yeah, Brashard Smith from SMU.
Yeah, I think he's someone to keep an eye on.
And he's there are guys that I know people like I would bet Brashard Smith's a better NFL player than Ollie Gordon.
Ollie, State. Man, poor Ollie. He should have been. God, if only he would have left freshman year.
Like I would bet there's some guys where like I know Brashard Smith's got a chance to be a better player than some of these guys that are ranked ahead of him. I know it.
How about Ollie just being a non-factor right now?
I mean, it's. I'd rather have a crappy junior, or a crappy, year before I leave, and then be awesome and have 1 year of awesome and have somebody try to explain it, than be one of the best football players in the country, come back, and then be one of the worst football players in the country. Like, it looks bad for Ollie Gordon out there.
Yeah, it also looked like they were like 11-man fronts, and they have like a 48-year-old quarterback that Mike Gundy just can't quit.
Yeah, no, it was, no, don't get me wrong. The Oklahoma State Cowboys were awful last year, but the stuff that he's in control of also looked bad.
Yeah, I know. And yeah, but God, I mean, they were stacking it against Ollie. And then Gundy's still handing it to him. Like, and then there's times where he wouldn't hand it to him. Gundy's the weirdest coach in the world, by the way. I think we don't have to talk about my Gundy. It's just like a roller coaster of awesome. And what the hell was that?
I still can't believe he's the coach there. They should have moved on. They should have done something else.
Yeah, I do think there's a lot of options. And someone's bringing up Jaden Blue. I think there is a lot of options, like in the pass game out of the backfield that we could perhaps keep an eye on.
There's guys that can catch out of the backfield. There's tight ends that can catch. Like, you're going to have to add pass catchers, plural, and then have to just be wide receivers.
Yeah, the tight ends. We'll get into the tight ends a little bit later on, but we say all that, and it kind of comes together that you need skill guys and you need the offensive line. They've added offensive line bodies. They've created offensive line competition. They hope that they've created a short-term solution to the problem, a little plug in the flood. But the long-term, those concerns remain the same, and the possibilities in the draft when it comes to drafting offensive line have not been eliminated by any stretch of the imagination. But you have the other needs. So that's what it is. The wide receiver thing is kind of, I'm almost to the point where I'm hoping the 3 guys are gone, like to where we don't even have to talk about it.
Hold on. I'm over here watching Restrepo run routes against air, and he looks pretty fast to me.
Why is he so much faster against air than
in the 40-yard? Because he has to go out there and put a move on. I think he has a puka shell necklace too.
Well, that just stopped him a little bit. Shout out to the puka shells in the TRL days. HDAV Traveler on the soup. Mike Gundy, I'm a man. I'm 40. How old is he now? It always makes me feel old when we joke about that now because
that was in 2007.
Yeah, it sucks because now it's like, damn, I'm 40. Evan McKinley.
You ain't never hate.
Swarm.
I'm thinking Landry's offensive heavy draft is about to come true. Wide receiver and RB rounds 1 and 2. No defensive picks until late after the draft. I'm wondering if this just sets up D'Amico to draft defense and say, F us all. I'm D'Amico. F you, Landry. I am D'Amico. I got no O. My defense is elite. Campbell fell to me at 25, and I took him. Like, hey, I got my Crimson Tide linebacker. He's awesome. We have one of the best defenses in the league. F you, D'Amico D's nuts. Take that.
That's Jihad Campbell for those keeping track at home.
Yeah.
I mean, look,
if Jihad Campbell falls to 25, what are you saying?
He'll be there. He'll be there.
Don't be shocked.
He'll be there. I'm more like there's like 3 probably defenders I'd be like, yeah, go ahead, do it.
Who? Stewart?
Emanawari.
Another safety?
I'm like, go ahead, do it.
Okay.
Jalen Walker.
That's not happening. He might go 5th.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I'd say, yeah, go ahead, do it. And then, I mean, Kenneth Grant would be just a load in the middle of this defensive line.
So this offensive line maneuvering and the wide receiver has you open to defense now. Like that is what they've done. Like this is because this was something you were not down with. And I'm not calling you out because it's obviously a different situation, but they've done enough with the offensive line and you've soured enough on this wide receiver group to where you would be open if D'Amico, no O, decides to go defense in round 1.
Well, no. I mean, if the guys that I think are good are there or are off the board, then like, yeah, take a defender if you feel strongly about him. But I mean, if you're sitting here and you're telling me Emeka Egbuka's on the board and they take a freaking linebacker, I'd be beside myself.
I don't know if I can get, but I can't get beside myself with them on defense because I feel like they know what they're doing.
Yeah, but you take a linebacker that you can't put on the field day 1. Like,
they might.
Like Jihad Campbell's going to start next to Aziz?
I'll put it this way, if they take a guy in the first round on defense, then I believe that he can play immediately because I trust their evaluation of defensive guys that much.
I mean, sure, a defensive tackle makes sense. Like, yeah, you can put Kenneth Grant on the field right away, but like, I can't put Jihad Campbell on the field day 1.
Can. He can adjust.
Just
he's been willing to adjust. We saw him last year.
Just draft a damn guard or wide receiver and call it a day.
Okay, well.
Actually, trade back and get a bunch more stuff on day 2. That's what I want you to do. That's what I really want you to do.
He's going with the defense, man. Now I'm getting a little bit more open to this. I feel like D'Amico just building the defensive empire.
I like Donovan Ezeraku from Boston College too, so maybe I'd think about him at 25. You need somebody when they inevitably let Danielle Hunter go.
Are you talking yourself into defense?
No, because there'd have to be
Danielle Hunter's 2 years away.
They'd have to be they rotate them like hockey lines, so
they signed like 30 this offseason.
That's fine. Ezeraku's better than most of them. I mean, it'd have to be a nightmare from like, oh, this guy's gone, up, this guy's gone, up, this guy's gone. And then it's like, okay, I guess they'll take a defender. The real question is, would I rather him take a defensive player or the tackle from Ohio State whose knee is messed up? And that's where you really put me in a blender, and I'm just like, oh, God.
Well, that's the scary thing about it, though, like with all the defense and stuff is, and I don't know if they're going to think this way. I think it would be kind of interesting, but like, what if they're thinking, okay, we have all these guys. We don't know if we sign any good offensive linemen, but they're on 1-year deals. They're supposed to hold it down. We don't know if they can, but we obviously hope so. So maybe we're more willing to take an offensive lineman who's not immediately ready to go because he can sit behind these 1-year stopgap guys.
The guy you take at 25 has got to be on the damn football field week 1.
But
help
this is the problem, though, like with this organization. And this is why I'm bringing up the defense thing, because if just based on watching this regime and this is something that I think they both have in common. I think Caserio and D'Amico have both failed in offensive line evaluation and decision-making. So on one hand, I sit here and I say, okay, they need this and this. Now the draft might not provide you with the opportunity to get a good wide receiver or a good offensive lineman. Who knows? But I say, okay, they need this. So if they select it, they naturally be like, okay, they need that. Let's figure it out. But I don't necessarily trust them. Like when it comes to the offensive line. On the other hand, I say, good Lord, they have a lot invested in defense. They've invested multiple draft assets to bring in Will Anderson, Daniil Hunter's like the most money they've ever given anybody. They drafted Kamari last year in the second round. They brought in all these defensive guys. They got all this depth and stuff. Enough with the defense, but then when they draft a defensive player, I trust them to make that right decision. So that's kind of like the emotions of like, knowing this organization, knowing these guys, and knowing the way that they've made decisions.
Yeah, sure. But the guy's like, if it's an end, it's a corner. Like, okay. Like, I trust him. Like, you drafted a freaking rotational linebacker in the 25?
But I feel like he's going to be awesome if they take him. That's the trust. It's going to be interesting. 25, a lot of options. Could D'Amico go defense? My goodness. Is it a possibility? Cody Stoots, he's sitting here rolling his eyes now, but you kind of notice he kind of opened up to that defensive possibility. This is our biggest happening so far. Cody Stoots open to defense at 25.
Yeah, in a scenario,
breaking news. Sound off the breaking news sounder. There are exceptions. There are possibilities for Cody Stoots to go defense.
I mean, like I'd have to go through and like basically chop off like the guys that I would be like that I like on offense and like assign them a spot. Like it'd be tough to see me get. Is it impossible? No, it's not impossible, but it'd be tough for me to get there.
But you got there.
Well, yeah, I'm not going to sit here and tell you there's not a scenario that exists where I'd be okay with defense. Like if Zabel's not there from North Dakota State and Banks isn't there from Texas and the tight ends are gone and the wide receivers are gone, it's like, okay, let's have a conversation about a defensive player versus, the seventh offensive lineman.
Interesting.
Let's have that conversation. Like Josh Connerly from Oregon. No thanks. Take a defender.
We will see. I'm intrigued to see what happens, and I'm very intrigued to see what's going on with you now. You're open to
screw this. Take a Marion Hampton at 25 before you take a defender. Let's not be stupid about this.
Okay. See, you talked yourself out of it. I like this. This is why we talk.
Take a Marion Hampton at 25 if there's no wide receivers or guards you like, and get the next Joe Mixon to be behind Joe Mixon.
Or take Trey Henderson and take the next Gibbs to be behind Joe Mixon.
That is not Trey Henderson. I don't know how you've convinced yourself of this. That is not Trey Henderson. Jesus. We're putting Gibbs on him now?
No. I'm just
I felt bad for dropping poor man's Nico Collins on Tetero McMillan, but now I might need to bump McMillan up.
I feel like McMillan is a rich man's Malcolm Kelly.
I got to figure out what McMillan is. I don't know.
I love Hampton. I think Hampton's the man.
if Ted McMillan's name was Jim Smith, I don't know if we'd like him as much. Us Ted McMillan fans.
Who knows? You like him, so we'll see what we do. But yeah, I'm down with the Omari. I think they like him. I think we go back to the draft when he said he met with them and he talked about pairing with Joe Mixon. I don't think he put that in his head on his own. He talked about it. So
it'd be tough to draft Amari on Hampton when he goes 20 whatever to the Chargers. 22.
God, everyone just thinks the Chargers are going to take every player. I've seen that. I've seen McMillan. I've seen
Loveland.
I've seen them get in the running back business.
The Steelers are kind of weird like that too. Like you could put a lot of players at the Steelers at 21.
Yeah, they're about to get Aaron Rodgers, so who knows? They might try to put something around him. So, Yep. We'll see.
Okay, hold on. Fake news, Chase. Fake news. Steve Smith did a video where he talked about all the bad stuff about Ted McMillan, how he doesn't like Ted McMillan. And then when Steve Smith put out his rankings, Ted McMillan was number 2 in the rankings. So,
but the way that he said it, the way that Steve Smith said it wasn't necessarily like that it was a lack of skill. I think he just basically said that he didn't put his best tape out. Like it was almost like he was like, I don't want to say he was trying to motivate him, but he was almost like saying that he's capable of doing so much more. It was almost like criticism, which if you don't have the motor and you don't have the ability to do it, then that's one thing. But the way that Steve Smith was saying it was basically like, this guy could bust way more ass than he does on tape.
I agree with that. I would tell you that Ted McMillan also suffered from the Ollie Gordon situation where the team sucked. Now it's a little bit different for a wide receiver because you still get yours, but that quarterback took a big step back, and their whole team took a step back.
Yeah, they weren't good, and they're really weird in a Big 12 environment. That just doesn't look right. Even BYU, I can get the Big 12. The Arizona State or Arizona just doesn't look right. Arizona State's kind of blended in. So anyway,
yeah. I feel like they've done a pretty good job there making the playoff and such.
Yeah, they've done all right.
Yeah.
But yeah, and they look more like a Big 12. Evan says, "Damn it, Bobby, we're blaming Bobby. Can't get through it.
Damn it, Bobby.
Just can't get through it without blaming Bobby."
So Hank Hill when he gets nervous.
Oh, good one. Anyway, appreciate everyone for coming through. Fun draft talk. A lot of bodies added, and a lot of possibilities in the draft, including Cody Stoots. Didn't think this was going to happen.
Yeah, Cody Stoots convinced himself Amari on Hampton at 25.
And I can get down with the Hampton thing. Didn't know the defense thing was happening.
Did Steve Smith really say this about Jack Besh?
Don't know. Didn't see that. Could be fake news. Who knows? I didn't go that deep. The best part didn't stay around for.
Jack Besh, more receptions when he was at LSU than Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas the year they were all on the same team.
All right, subscribe, like, right along. Always remember, when it comes to this Texan stuff, we're all in it together.
I know sometimes the facts are hard to digest, but that was the case. Eat good, sleep good, be good. We'll talk Texans again soon. Thanks for watching, everybody.